and not traditional medicine and herbalism, because that is outside the system and they can collect whatever the crap they want and maintain their lifestyle. Whereas working as a doctor within the system, they're little more than a bureaucrat at the DMB. And that creates all sorts of delays and problems. So Canadians come to the US for treatment. And until that system collapses, there's always going to be an idiot telling you how wonderful it is. And now, without further ado, I have waiting outside a mensch of mensches, a most wonderful Jewish guy from New Jersey that hasn't been around for a while here. So, without further ado, Ron Coleman, Esquire.
Hey,
Hello there.
how you doing, buddy?
Good evening, my friend. How is it going over there?
It's raining. It's been a very rainy couple of weeks here in New Jersey, and I love it. It makes me feel good. It
Yes,
releases the tension, and it
clears the
also
air
makes the grass green.
and clears the air too.
Clears the air. And isn't that really what blabbing with Radley's all about?
Yes,
I
I
mean,
remember.
you told me there was going to be beard blather tonight too, and I wanted to the
Not beer
world.
brother. That's Saturday.
Oh, that's Saturday. Okay, well, I can't do it on Saturday, but I wanted to give the world the benefit of my beard as long as about as long as it gets because it was Sphera. We don't shave from Passover and for the next 33 days. So tomorrow I get a haircut. So this is
I,
my full.
hold on, hold on. Let me put you on screen so people can admire your beard in full splendor. There you go.
Look at that. That is gnarly. That is look. It's beginning to get little
What do you mean,
knot.
gnarly?
It's long. It's long, and it gets if I do any physical activity, which I strenuously avoid, but it gets very hot very fast. Yeah, no, yours is long.
Yeah, don't worry, because in June is where I always cut it short in June and January.
I distinctly
So
heard him say June.
yeah, June and January is the two times where I cut it short, and then I let it grow wild until everybody thinks I'm a rabbi.
A rabbi or some other kind
I,
of some
I,
other
I
kind
never I never told you that about Aunt Ida. Ida
I think
was
you did.
Ida
She wanted you.
Rosenblum.
She wanted you to be a rabbi.
No, when they introduced me to her, I mean this is a woman who came to Ellis Island in 1905, and she was already a grown up, and they're gonna introduce me as the grandson of Yanko, her nephew. My grandfather was her nephew, and when I walk into the room, I had a beard even longer than this. And from her wheelchair, he looked at me and exclaimed, "A rabbi! A rabbi! We have a rabbi in the family! Yankel's grandson is a
Oh,
rabbi!"
you didn't tell me that. Yeah.
And nobody had the heart to tell her that I was just a bullshitter. So she died believing that I was a rabbi.
Worst things can happen.
Hey, it made her happy. That was a mitzvah almost,
Speak to me. What's going on? What's the good word?
What's a good word? I don't know. I'm working on two projects. By the way, President Trump has to please slow down for 2 weeks so the rest of us can catch up.
I think he feels that probably quite understandably that he doesn't have a great deal of time to work with.
Yeah, I know he doesn't. And by the way, I was just being mildly sarcastic.
No, I know that.
No,
Yeah.
don't let him slow down. We did this, but by golly, this trip through the Middle East is momentous. Every second of it.
And
The things I
Israel,
like and the things I don't.
and I mean, I assume that you get it, Bradley, because you're smarter. Bradley, I called you Bradley again.
Nah, it's okay.
You're smarter.
I've been called worse, you know.
That's also true. Not even counting the time they called you Rabbi.
Yeah.
Um, you I assume that you get it, that this is not Trump folding
Oh no.
to Qatar. This is Trump completely reconceptualizing what's going on here.
Yeah. And you know, it is as if somebody is reeling in a great white. You nailed the great white. It ate the hook all the way to his asshole, and this guy is reeling in the great white, and somebody says he's giving in to the great white. Trump is
There
not
are a lot. There are
surrendering to Qatar.
a lot of opinions.
Trump is not surrendering to Qatar. He's reeling Qatar in.
Exactly. Let me just show
And
you a tweet from my friend Ben Bedejo.
not Ben Pendejo, Ben Bedejo.
Like I said,
Yeah. Where can you post it? Can you show it on the screen from there?
maybe you're. I thought I was.
I thought you should be able to. Let me see.
Yeah. Well, it says I don't. You're right. I don't see it on the screen. Did you authorize me to share?
Hold on, because
You're the
I
host, so you have to.
I thought you're always authorized, but I'm not entirely sure I know how to.
So
Yeah.
then I'm,
If not, you can send me the image and I'll post it.
no, that's not a bad idea. Okay, stop sharing because it ain't getting shared. That much I can tell you. But I do think we do get it. There, you can click it your own self.
Okay, I clicked it. Let's put it on screen. There we go. Okay. Ben Badejo, it's called Victory, not with a bang, but with a series of tribute payments to the US and indirectly to Israel. Qatar knows the awful role it played in the hell Israel was put through. This week they began to say sorry.
I mean that he's really sticking his neck out on. I mean he's really sticking his neck out. But I do think there is also people have to understand Qatar is not identical in any way with Iran.
No, not at
People
all.
are, and I'm not here to make excuses for Qatar because the damage they've done on the university campuses in the U.S. It's going to be
Huge.
a lost generation.
Yes.
But they're not Iran, and I think it would not be shocking to say that they very well recognize that they have an opportunity to be on the right side of history as opposed to going backward in time with the lunatics in Tehran.
It always happens.
Reside.
Qatar, if anything, has been the used car salesman of the Middle East. These people have been playing both sides and the middle, upside and downside. We have a U.S. base, and they were instrumental. Our command was put in Doha for the Iraq invasion. Uh, they were instrumental in our ability to respond in Iraq and at one time in Iran, if we had the balls. They also have an Iranian base in Qatar.
Yes.
They deal with us But they're also the bankers for the mullahs.
Yeah, I mean they've got a lot to prove. They've got a lot to prove.
Yes.
But
Doha is like a ginormous souk where all the deals are made. It reminds me of Casablanca, the movie, uh, where everybody and their mothers are there. Uh, Hamas and the Iranians, the U.S. and the Brits, the Saudis and the Turks. Everybody's mixing it up there, and now they
crazy,
need a way out.
I mean, it is definitely credible to at least open one's mind up to the possibility that Trump is coming at this. I mean, I hate to say 4D chess, but he's coming at this from an angle and a perspective, and with an intention that is completely different from the tracks that everyone has been trained to think in. Along the tracks everyone is trained to think along for the last 20, 30 years.
Do you think, for instance, that Trump would do this with Qatar without being in total agreement with Saudi?
And remember what we were all saying about Saudi Arabia 30 years ago. Because Saudi Arabia was Qatar 30 years ago. Saudi
Yes,
Arabia was sending, they were financing
in the 80s, absolutely.
exactly the same shit in the universities,
Yeah,
exactly the same. They chose sides. And they have all but shown that you know that they're on the side of civilization.
yeah.
Not that you and I want to live there. Not that you and I are welcome to live there.
I don't know. I want to take a look at the line.
At the line.
The line is an 80-mile long
Oh,
ship.
that. Oh, yeah. Well, tell me how it goes. You can look at it
Yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah, I know. It's funny. What I mean is the definitely forward looking.
Yes,
The octagon is another marvelous. Some of these things are almost sci-fi, and can only work if Saudi is inserted into the community of nations. Otherwise, they're burning bills in the desert.
and it's fascinating to me how hard the Obama people. Not fascinating,
Mhm.
but it's compelling how hard the Obama and Biden people have resisted that in favor of
Oh yeah,
Iran. And
amazing.
the only explanation for it is that they let all these Muslim Brotherhood people into their circle of influence. Because there's nothing that can rationally be uh, um, attributed to advancing American interests by favoring Iran over Saudi Arabia.
Over Saudi, none
Nothing.
whatsoever. And when you say it, when I wrote Gander, my epilogue was a rant essentially about what we had lost in the past 40 years. And I'm still upset. I'm still pissed off.
Oh, it
And
was it was really you know. So we say the rabbis teach, the real rabbis, not just the ones that your aunt thinks she sees. That before the Hebrews left Egypt, they had descended to the very lowest level, 49 levels of impurity. And if they had not left Egypt exactly when they did, they would have been irredeemable.
yep,
That,
and they still have to spend a few generations in the desert
right.
before they were allowed to into the promised land.
There you go. And that's where we are now.
Yeah,
That's where we are now. With God's
and
help in
that's how I
America.
feel now.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm gonna set foot on the promised land, but as long as my children or their children do, I'm okay.
Amen.
Now, the thing with Saudis change, and the rant about what we lost and all that jazz. Uh, One of the things that bothered me is that Obama's liaison to the Muslim White House liaison to the Muslim community was the son of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood in America,
Yep.
and he was poached from the governor's mansion in Virginia. Remember, it was McAuliffe that was the governor of Virginia at the time.
Oh, McAuliffe.
Yeah, I will always call him
Oh,
McAuliffe.
McAuliffe.
Yeah,
That was a joke. That was a joke. That was a good. That was a good one, McAuliffe.
yeah. No,
I'm not. I'm. He was awful, boy. Was he
Terry
bad.
McAuliffe, the son of a bitch who was shaking down Buddhist monks to get donations from China for the Clinton campaign. I mean, the guy has a history, and he introduced these guys as Muslim community liaisons in the governor's mansion in Richmond, and Obama picked them from there. And when you take a look at that, I mean, we had Iranian spies in charge of the
Literally,
Iran desk at the
literally,
State Department.
literally.
Literally, literally, not. We're
And there's no
beyond the
accountability.
clear.
No accountability.
Zero accountability, and they put all of these people in, and they get their ideas from them. They get their analysis from them. And it's the damage done to the U.S. We lost a couple of decades at least, and we're now dealing with stuff that could have been fixed in the 90s.
The social harm, the garbage people that you see depicted on TikTok, the the mind virus that has destroyed an entire college generation. And the universities themselves, they've got to go. Look at Harvard. Look at Harvard. What they're fighting for. It's just absolute crap.
This okay. We cannot be racist. Can we have our own Jim Crow laws now? Um, yeah, Harvard was established in the first half of the 17th century, among other things, with a donation from my family of 1 pound of gold.
Get out of here.
I'm not
Really?
John Osgood, my seventh great grandfather donated 1 pound of. I want it back.
With interest.
Yes. No, actually, forget the interest. I want it back. Their idea of what Harvard, first of all, it was to be a school to teach the pastors of the congregational churches a little bit about something so that they weren't just the average palooka. Uh, and it expanded from there into philosophy and the law and all that jazz, and eventually became one of the greatest centers for learning in the world. And these people destroyed it in one generation. It's criminal.
It is always easier to destroy than to build. And the higher you build, the easier it is to topple what has been built.
Yeah, they, we have enough proof in front of our eyes. And the
But
same thing with
what
Yale.
but surely we can say something productive and positive. It can't just we can't just kvetch. It's too much about the kvetching.
No, a little bit of vetching is okay, but you're absolutely right. And we are seeing the end of this misery.
Yeah, I do. I'm, people are worried about, does Trump only have 2 years, because he's going to spend a year just in litigation. We understand
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Um,
and we have a year until the midterms,
right.
and we better get a lot of stuff done with election integrity, because I hate to think what the last 2 years of the Trump administration would be.
But the real question is, okay, so let's take that and put it here. So we got that. The question is there another kind of change? Is there another, in other words, I think there has been some real success in dethroning the corporate media. I think that fewer people, if I saw statistics, basically everybody who watches or gets his news from the traditional media is our age or older.
Mhm.
Younger people just couldn't care less what CBS says, what NBC says.
I'm a lot younger than I look then. I haven't
I'm
given a
even
crap
younger
for
than I
10
look.
years. Um,
Wait,
yeah.
how old are you? How old are you?
Hmm?
How old are you?
In 2 weeks, I'll be 66.
So you're very old. I just turned 62 in March.
Ah,
You you're
you're a kiddo.
well, you're a genuine boomer.
Yes, most
I,
definitely.
I do not like
I'm
being
a
lumped
boomer.
in with the boomers because by the time I came of age,
Yes.
you guys had stripped the land bare.
Uh, you're a 60s baby. I was born with Eisenhower.
Yeah, big difference.
Yes. When I was born, there was no communist government in Cuba. Imagine that.
Well, I don't have to imagine it. My mother tells me about it because she was there.
Ooh. So anyway, I think that number one, what Trump is doing in the Middle East is absolutely fantastic. It's not just Qatar. It's Turkey. He's changing the relationship with Turkey. I know that a lot of our followers are gonna think that I'm sold to jihad or something. We need Turkey in NATO. We need Turkey in Europe. Turkey is a country with 70 years of secularism in government that these last 2 decades with Erdogan were not enough to undo. Isolation might speed that process, but engagement can keep them within our fold, and we desperately need them in more
Yeah, I
ways
mean
than
they have the potential. I mean the problem. What's the problem? I'm not saying anything anyone here doesn't know. Their so-called president, their dictator, has built his power on Islamism,
yes, the
Islamism,
the Simit salesman, I call him.
and he doesn't really have. I don't know how he gets off it because his interests and Turkey's interests are not in opposing Israel, and in fact, they were the Muslim country that
Supportive,
Israel had, yeah, 20 years ago, the best relationship with, maybe
yes.
not counting Morocco, but Morocco doesn't really count for much.
And I'm telling you, the vast majority of the Turkish population have sympathy for Israel, for instance, and for America. And they see themselves as Europeans.
And also, I mean, I think Trump does have the ability, I think, to leverage the NATO thing with them and say,
Yep.
if this is gonna, if you want to be the next Iran, it's not going to be as part of NATO. No freaking way that's happening, and that's, I think, a very big prestige issue
Yeah.
for the
And,
Turks.
and we are in the last rounds of the Erdogan experiment. One of the things that supported him was the war against the PKK. Well, there no longer is a war with the PKK. There is no PKK. They self-dissolved, laid down their weapons, and walked into the sunset. So all of Erdogan's rhetoric to keep the PKK uh, at bay, it's out the window, and that, of course, is what gave them a lot of support in eastern Turkey, which is where the Islamists are. The cities in Turkey are not Islamists. The opposite is true. Now he's jailed Imamoglu, uh, who is killing Erdogan in the polls.
Is he going to be allowed to win?
If not him, the current mayor of Ankara will replace him, just like Simeon replaced uh, Carly Georgescu in Romania. I mean, these movements are not one-person movements.
And
What you
these movements that are threats to the Turkish regime, are they? Where do they stand with regard to, Islam, to Iran, and that's
they are Ataturkist. They
so
believe in the
they're separate,
separation of government and state. They may be very faithful Muslims or other religions as well,
right? Oh,
but they believe in the separation of uh, 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 government and religion in an almost Jeffersonian way.
have you been to Turkey?
Yes, many years ago, I have many friends there. Many. Uh, my mother used to go to Turkey. Every time she went to Israel, she went to Turkey to visit friends. It's an interesting thing. Uh, But the last time I was in Turkey was in the 90s, before, way before Erdogan.
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 That's how you say it.
Yep, Erdogan. Imagine the G is not there.
But they use what alphabet do they use? They
Oh,
use the
they,
Roman
they use
alphabet?
this. They use the same alphabet we use with some special characters,
Oh,
uh,
right, I've
like
seen that. Yeah.
like the also found in Romanian and others, like the C with the little thing.
All right, so that's how the
Um,
G gets in there, though, because it's just
yeah,
cut and paste.
The G has, if you notice, a little written accent
Yeah,
that's like a little horny. That tells you to ignore it.
the things we're learning.
Yeah, I know. It's like the H in Yorkshire.
Well,
I was gonna say in French, but it's the same thing in Yorkshire.
oh, okay,
Mhm.
all right. Well, good. Well, that's a good observation.
And you know why I call him the Simit salesman?
No, I don't.
Okay, there is a neighborhood right on the Bosphorus that used to be the Greek neighborhood until a big massacre in the 50s. And in that little low class neighborhood, there was this little kid that used to go on the streets with a tray with simit. Simit is like, their version of pretzels or donuts. And his mother would make the simit and he would go on the streets and sell it. And that was how the family got an income. That was Erdogan.
Okay, so it came up from humble origin.
He came up from the streets. And then he was a soccer player and he became a star in the local club. Eh, that explains a lot about Erdogan. He's not an extremely cultured person, and I'm being generous.
Well,
But
what Muslim leader is
he had, well, Mohammed bin Salman, who's
right?
got an
That would be
IQ
yeah,
larger than, yeah.
right. Those are educated
Um,
people. Yeah.
yeah, there are some, and Um, but this guy is, and I guarantee you that King Abdallah is no fool. Um, he was educated in Oxford uh, before Oxford became the shithole it is today.
And his wife went
Uh,
to Princeton.
yeah, uh, I remember Princeton in the 70s. It was a great place to study. And but what he lacks in education, he has in spades in street smarts.
It's not for nothing.
No, you underestimate people like Erdogan at your own risk. Uh, he knows what he's dealing with. He knows the mob better than anybody else there.
Well, I mean, that's true of a lot of people who go very far in politics. They have a sense for, how to lead and how to obtain and maintain power. And they have the capacity for cruelty, and they are prepared to um, change their positions on any matter on a dime without ever acknowledging that they made a change. And by the way, everything I'm saying is true about almost every politician.
Oh yeah, no, there's even Trump. Trump without his youth in Queens wouldn't be the same character. His ability to interact with construction workers, with deli owners. I lived at one point very near uh, his stomping ground. As a matter of fact, for a little while, I went to the same high school 11 years later. Uh, and I know the characters and I recognize them in him. There is a lot of Queens Boulevard and Union Turnpike in the man.
Interesting.
His sense of humor, his particular brand of sarcasm, his hyperbole. I mean, he's like any one of the guys I used to go that we used to have in Queens Boulevard, one of the last roller skating burger places.
Wait a minute. Explain to me what's your connection to Queens?
I lived there for a while,
When? What
uh,
part of your life?
different periods. In '75, I went there to do a stint 1 year in high school, and that was the same one that Trump had attended 11 years earlier. I didn't know that at the time. And at that time, I lived in Forest Hills.
Oh, that's where I was born.
Mhm. No kidding. Ingraham Street.
Well, I lived there till I was 2, so I don't have
Oh,
any recollection.
no memory. Ingraham Street was just a couple of streets from the tennis courts where they used to have the Open before it moved to Flushing. Mhm. And then in '89, I returned to Forest Hills. I was a general manager of an airline in New York, '88 and '89. And I went to live in Forest Hills because it was an easier access to Kennedy Airport than other locations. You know, just
Sure.
hop into the Van Wyck, you're there. Thank you, goodbye.
Right. I mean, if getting to JFK any other way from
Yeah,
any other part of the city, that's a job in and of itself.
yeah. That's why all the flight attendants lived in Stew Gardens. Uh,
Stewardess.
yes, Kew Gardens. We used to call it Stew Gardens. They were all on Lefferts Boulevard. But
But you're right though. You're right about that aspect of his personality. 100%.
hundred
He's a
percent
normal guy. He's a normal guy.
normal. Other billionaires don't have the street smarts that he does. And I sometimes, I see him do things. I see him make certain jokes, and I realize that he's probably more at ease among the guys in Queens than with any other group.
And that's why he really has the common touch. I mean, contrary to what the lunatics say about him, he genuinely has the common touch And I don't mean that in a
Yeah,
condescending way. He knows how to relate to everyday people. By the way, he grew up managing, his father's business, managing freaking apartment buildings. You remember Trump
yeah,
Village? I mean, like
yeah. Do I
this was
remember? I used to drive by it every day.
right, exactly right. You're
Eh,
right on the way to the airport, of course.
Yeah,
And, and
and
so you're dealing with the entire staff of resident red brick residential buildings.
yes, and those were not luxury apartments. Of course, they called everybody luxury if it had a bathroom, but they 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 weren't luxury apartments. That's where the office workers and the store owners lived.
People like me. So we moved from Forest Hills because my
Yes.
mother had another had another uh, my brother. So we moved to Brighton Beach and moved into
Ooh.
one of those red brick before any
Mm.
Ukrainians. It was a Jewish neighborhood,
Yes.
uh, and the Brighton Beach baths and the whole beach, the old fashioned beach culture. Playing handball. I went to PS 225, but we lived in one of those 7-story red brick buildings, the same as the kind that
Yep.
Trump's father owned, and we lived on the second floor, so you didn't have to take the elevator up. And I remember, my mother, we'd be playing on the street outside, and the ice cream truck would come, Mom, and she'd throw down a dime, a dime,
A
a
dime.
dime. With a dime, you could buy an
Yes.
ice cream.
In '76, you could buy a hot dog and a Coke in Coney Island for 25 cents.
Folks, I'm talking about the early '70s. Okay, you think I remember when I told because Brooklyn. I remember when I told my wife, who comes from Rhode Island, that we used to get seltzer delivered to our house in real
Yes.
spritzer bottles, like in the Three Stooges. She said, when did you grow up in the 1800s? No, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is always a good 75 years behind the rest of the country.
And the milkman.
What's that?
And the milkman.
Milkman, of course. Yeah.
I used to leave the bottles outside the door. Uh, God, I didn't have a wife for them to entertain themselves on the way to the next house. But no, it's life was much different, and I think that contributed a lot to who Trump is and what his core values are. Now, another characteristic of the boys in Queens is hyperbole.
Right.
He does that a lot. And of course, the more, oh, he lied. No, he didn't lie. He just embellished. It, you do it in daily conversation at the Artemis Greek restaurant on Queens Boulevard every freaking day of your life.
That's right. Listen, it's all fake outrage. It's all vicious ideology. Uh, we have we've lost a lot. We've really lost a lot. I
We
mean,
did.
you can't look. Those were tumultuous times in their own ways. I mean, there was some
Oh,
really tense times in the public schools in New York in the '60s and '70s.
oh yeah. There were 100 bombs in New York in the '70s. Terrorism was a daily affair. If it wasn't, Obama's dear leader in Chicago, who at the time was in New York, Bill Ayers, blowing himself up at the village trying to make a bomb. Remember that one?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Eh?
They blew up that townhouse on Greenwich
On
on
Great,
Washington Square.
yeah. Or that friend of Obama uh, and many a Democrat, Puerto Rican Nazi onanist who blew up France's Tavern, uh,
Yeah, those are
50
all
wounded, 5 decapitated.
no
That was
accountability.
the '70s too. I mean, not everything was American graffiti.
Right. That's right.
I remember an Italian woman on Lefferts Boulevard. There was, and I'm sure you know this, uh, at to get to Lefferts Boulevard, if you're coming in on Queens Boulevard going east, you kind of have to go up a side street and then turn right as Lefferts Boulevard starts. And 2 blocks from there, there was a parking lot surrounded by these red brick buildings. And there was a woman who screamed for hours while she was raped and murdered, and nobody. Uh,
Where, what was her name again?
I'm trying to remember the name. It was an
Kitty,
Italian name.
Kitty
Yes,
Genovese. Kitty Genovese.
Genovese, Kitty Genovese. Uh,
This was an epical, really before my time, but it was so we
it
it
was
was
epoch because it was a wake up call,
right.
and for a little while, New Yorkers became kinder. Then they forgot about it.
Well, but you know what? So they weren't the same. They're not the same. Some of them are the same people, but
Yeah,
the middle class absolutely left New York in the '60s and '70s.
yeah,
It was not became unlivable, and then you had this obviously this golden age. You know, the rebuilding after Koch and Giuliani.
yeah.
Uh,
That's where I went back to Manhattan.
it was a golden age,
Yes, it was.
and I don't think there's any
How am
going back.
I? How am I doing? How am I doing?
How many? Yeah, no, great times. You know,
Oh,
I I'm very glad you asked me to stop by tonight. It's been too long. I can't stay. I can't stay really any longer.
yep.
So I'm going to leave you to your people and your program. But with God's help, we'll do this again soon. And I'm glad to see that we're on the same page just about everything as we usually are.
Yeah. Well, every now and then a difference, but that is the salt and pepper. Uh, we are on the same page in the principles, I believe, and that is what matters.
Good night, my
Um,
friend.
Good night. Take care. Say hello to your wife.
Thank you very much.
Take care. And there we are. That was pleasant. I didn't know that we were going to end up, uh, uh, you know, going down memory lane uh, about a time that I recall with great affection, with great pleasure. Um, in many ways, my life here in Florida or in Virginia is not that different from the one that we were just discussing. That is something that people forget. As Ron was saying, we vetch too much sometimes. But in most places in America, you don't have a war zone. All of the stuff that occupies our minds in social media, all of these pseudo confrontations, uh, mostly for the purpose of clickbaiting, are are nothing. And most Americans live pretty much by themselves. When you go for encounters with police, well, I don't know. That depends. Does that include having a beer at the local watering hole? Because that's about the only time I have contact with police in my towns. I don't know. We need to discuss that a little bit more. Let me stop for 1 second and tell you that we're doing this through our channel in Odyssey and two timelines in Twitter. And we used to have a magnificent system of support through Odyssey. But as Um, as luck would have it, that one is on hold. So we very much appreciate your support. And if you want to buy us a cup of coffee so we can continue to do this, since you cannot click on super chats or support or anything of the sort. Uh, oh, what am I looking at? No, I'm not looking at anything at all. Um, now, uh, if you want to do this, there are two ways to do it. One would be to uh, become a member, subscribe to at the Bradley in on X, and that would be right here. Or you can make a one-time contribution or a